Welcome to another episode of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sean, here with my other co-host, Sam. Sam, how are you?
Doing well. Just another day in paradise.
I'm doing good, too. I'm slightly intoxicated from a mead festival that I was at, and now I've continued the party by continuing to drink mead. Shout out to all of the local Washington meaderies. The Mead Fest at Skull was a pretty darn good time. What are you doing on your Sunday? It's Sunday night for you, so your Sunday's over. What did you do?
My Sunday is rapidly dwindling. Today was yard work, so some of our listeners will know this, but my wife and I have recently purchased a new house, and we are going to move in over the next couple weeks. It's in the near same city where we currently live, and as part of this we need to get our current place, which we're renting, ready to be relisted. So time to do some extra cleaning of the yard, and then brought a few things over to the new house. And Haley and I took I almost said her name, but took our daughter to the Henry Ford Museum nearby Dearborn, and there was a specific Julia Child exhibit that they had for a limited time, and both Haley and I enjoy cooking and like Julia Child, and so we took some time to go through that, walk through the rest of the exhibit, and then enjoyed a Julia Child-inspired lunch buffet at the Henry Ford Museum. So relatively lazy Sunday, but we are about to embark on a stretch of very busy weeks with the move.
That'll be eventful.
Indeed.
And another place for me to shack up when I'm visiting Michigan, so it'll be nice.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this place will be nicer than our current place. Well, it is nicer than our current place, so hopefully you will get to experience that.
And how far are you now from the Michigan Renaissance Fair?
Oh, that's a great question.
And Holly from Ferndale?
Yes. So we are maybe 35, 40 minutes if traffic is cooperating. So coincidentally, we've been doing a lot of back and forth driving to this new house, which is only about a mile away. And there's a large park in between that we drive by. And then the new place, we will be very close to the park. Going there Friday night to drop some things off and just make sure everything's all right with the house, I saw a group of people doing sword fighting practice, medieval combat practice in the park. And I was like, all right, these are my people. So I think some night this summer,
one night you're just going to saunter over.
I'm going to saunter over. I'm going to put on my Ren Fair costume.
Roll a D20.
Yep. Saunter over there. Be like, hey guys, what's going on? Let's get some long swords going here. Yeah, it looks like they were swinging some swords, and at least a couple of them had bows as well, which I don't know, practicing archery in a public park is a bold move, but anyway, so looking
That's how you
forward
get
to
the cops called on you.
Yeah. That's how you get the cops called on you. That's how you accidentally shoot a cat. That's how you get the local Karens up in arms.
Speaking of Ren Fairs, Washington Ren Fair update. They are moving from our last location that I was complaining so hard about in terms of heat. And
it's because it was in the middle of a field, right? No shade?
This is in the middle of like a legit is it a farm? Like a field at the farm that they rented. But it was in Bonnie Lake, and now it's moving up to Monroe, which is a little bit north of like Bellevue, Kirkland area. It's a little northeast of Seattle. So it's a bit of a farther drive for me, but there's rumors that eventually it's going to be a pretty nice environment, and it should be a little bit cooler up in the foothills of the Cascades instead of in a field in Bonnie Lake. So here's to hoping, fingers crossed, that it's a little bit better of an experience.
That is the downfall of Ren Fair, because I'm thinking about it right now from the perspective of we are going to have a 4-month-old, 5-month-old child during Ren Fair. So we need to be very worried about dehydration and sun exposure and all that stuff, but
that's the benefit of Michigan, though, is that Holly, it's a pretty wooded place. Yes. So you can still find your shady spots.
Yeah, you can find your shady spots. You can get out of the sun. water is expensive and you have to wait in line a long, long time. So we'll have to strategize our Ren Fair visits this year and come up with a costume for a 5-month-old baby.
Just a burlap sack.
Yep, she can be a peasant baby. Okay, so we have 2 items on the agenda today. As advertised, actually, both items were advertised if you are following us on social media. So, but as we discussed in last episode, we are going to begin our coverage of The Witcher, starting with season 1, episodes 1 through 4. And then we'll work our way through the rest of The Witcher until the start of the new season it's August, right? That it comes out, I believe.
I actually believe it's the very end of June.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because we're doing part 1 and part 2 of season 1. Then we're going to do part 1 and part 2 of season 2. And then
we get it.
We start season 3 with new episodes as they're coming out. So,
all right. Well, there you go, folks. So we're going to begin that Witcher coverage today. And we are also, as was mentioned, we are going to, I guess, give the floor, Sean, to you for coverage discussion of the recent Gollum video game. So why don't you go ahead and jump into that?
On Facebook, I had shared an article where the video game developer issued an apology for the game, and it's very warranted. We're in a day and an age where video games, the quality of them is so high using that Unreal Engine that the quality of what would you call it? I'm blanking on the term. The picture, the video,
graphics,
the graphics, that's the one. The quality of the graphics that we're looking at are so phenomenal that it's like you're watching a movie most of the time. And with that comes the new price tag on video games. The average for one of these new games coming out is like $69.99. So we've gone up $10 from 60 to $70. And you think that with that price increase, you're also going to get higher quality. The quality that we're expecting now with the Xbox Series X and the PS5. But the video game Gollum that came out, I've been explaining it to people that if the game would have come out in 2008, that people would have very few problems with the quality of the graphics. But therein lies the problem. It's 2023. So I don't know what they were thinking. The storyline is fine. It's cool to run around Mordor and Barad-dûr as Gollum, and the gameplay itself is pretty much stealth-based, where they give you missions and you have to travel through Mordor undetected. And it's kind of like a mix of Assassin's Creed of like jumping and climbing on buildings and things and trying to stay hidden.
Question for you. Is there a mission where you have to steal a baby from an open window in the Mirkwood? Wasn't that like one of the like rumors of Gollum?
Oh, I mean, I haven't gotten there yet. I'm still in there.
No, spoiler alert, Gollum ate babies, everybody.
Yeah. So I'm in like chapter 4 of the game. So I doubt I'm even like halfway through, but this is where I'm at this point. The storyline, if you're really into Lord of the Rings, is, I think, intriguing, but for the price tag of the game, it's not worth it. Like, don't spend your money on the game. I had pre-ordered it because originally the game was supposed to come out like over Christmas. And then randomly, like a month ago, I got a notification that it shipped. And I was like, what the hell? This is like 7 months earlier than they were saying it was going to be delivered. But so I don't know. It is what it is. They issued an apology because it's been so panned by fans and reviewers that the graphics are just so bad. And there's a picture that people are posting of Gollum from the Shadow of Mordor game, where he looks phenomenal. And then there's a cut of Gollum from this Gollum game, and it legit looks so bad compared to something that came out 10 years ago.
Oh, God. I'm looking at some images right now.
Right? And a way I describe the graphics or how the game looks, it's kind of like that Telltale series that came out.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like a shitty comic book. It's really hard to explain. if you really like
Well-
Lord of the Rings and you like the lore, wait until the game is cheap because it's not worth $70.
So quick aside, do you know who voices Gollum in the Shadow of Mordor?
Hopefully it's Andy Serkis. That would be amazing.
Liam O'Brien.
What?
Yeah.
That's pretty great. I did not know that.
Yeah. There was a Critical Role one-off where they did a game kind of set in the Shadow of War. Or I think this was the sequel. Shadow of War is the sequel.
Shadow of Mordor.
So it was like they were doing a promotion with Shadow of Mordor with Laura Bailey, Darren DePaul, and it was a smaller subset of the Critical Role crew, and it was really fun, just kind of role playing as these orcs in Mordor.
That's all I have to say about the game, though. So
the apology is notable, right? Because before recording, you were saying this is only the second time in history that a publisher has apologized for the quality of a game.
Yeah, and the first time was the very well remembered Cyberpunk 2077. And I mean, the problem with that game, if I recall correctly, that it was much more of the game itself was just glitchy when it came out. So it was really difficult to play. It was nothing to do with the graphics being poor. It was just the game itself was just a really poor game. This is different, wherein, like I said before, we're in a different phase of where the expectations are so much higher. And especially if you're going to charge $70 for a video game, it has to look up to the standards of what the Xbox Series X and the PS5, what they're shooting for. And I'm taking a second just to try to see if I can find the apology. Here we go. So it says, "We would like to sincerely apologize for the underwhelming experience many of you have had with The Lord of the Rings Gollum upon its release. We acknowledge and deeply regret the game did not meet the expectations we set out for ourselves or our dedicated community." They go on to say that creating a game set in Middle-earth has been the greatest honor and biggest challenge we have faced so far. At Daedalic, we understand that a game's success relies on the enjoyment and satisfaction of its players. We genuinely value your feedback and have been actively listening to your voices, reading your comments, and analyzing the constructive criticism and suggestions you've provided. So where my biggest confusion is with this game and the release of it is it was scheduled originally to come out in December. Why then does it come out in late May when you could have used all this time to make it better? I don't know. It just seems like an incredibly poor marketing decision. They had to have known by testers that it wasn't gonna come out to an awesome release. So I just don't know what anybody was thinking with this game. I don't know what I was thinking spending $70 on it, if I'm being honest. But
that's a lot of money for a video game. I mean, I don't know. I don't play a ton of video games. I'm doing a replay right now, though, of Breath of the Wild, which has been out for 6 years. The sequel was just released, but it's still great. Actually, I think that ties into this quote that I was looking for. It's from Shigeru Miyamoto, who is, I think he works for the studio that worked on Zelda or does the Zelda series. And it's a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. So not only was this game released, most games are released on their date or they're delayed. Very few are released before. So it's please, yes, keep it the extra months, go back with the graphics. I mean, it might have just been a thing with the money. They're like, we don't have enough money to fix the graphics. We need to ship this product so that we can at least get some money in. And then maybe they can come back to it. And I don't know, in the modern era, did you buy it digitally or did you buy an actual game disc?
Oh, I only do discs because my whole philosophy is I can resell a disc. Once you buy it digitally, you just have it. So I don't understand that whole process.
Maybe there's a way to do some fixes. I don't know, but it's unfortunate because you're not the only person, and
Well,
$70 is not an insignificant amount of money for anyone.
it's not. But the last thing I'll say before we go on to the main story of The Witcher, when you buy discs, if you look at the actual like download, what you're downloading off the disc, it only tends to be like 2 gigs. And then it's like 25 gigs that you have to download from the network. So I don't know. I feel like for the most part, they could fix a lot of this stuff, but how big of an update would it be if you have to redo the entire graphics of a video game?
Yeah.
It would be, you might as well just reissue a new game. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's it for me on the Gollum game.
Well, Gollum game, so long. Farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye.
Yeah. Buy it when it's like $10 on sale over Black Friday because no one else is buying it.
Yeah, get it in the little bargain bin at the checkout at the Home Goods or whatever. Okay.
And that leaves us with our main topic for today.
The Witcher season 1, episodes 1 through 4. We're calling it part 1. They were all, I think they were released at the same time. Yeah. So
because it's Netflix.
Yeah. Before we jump into the discussion of the actual episodes, we should do a quick overview of our familiarity with The Witcher. So let's start with kind of where we are now, but then also where were we when the Witcher television show first came out? You want to kind of give us your background with The Witcher, Sean?
Yeah, when the show came out in 2019. So spoiler warning for seasons 1 and 2 of The Witcher. It's been out for 4 years. If you haven't listened to it yet, there's no excuses anymore. So, and the books have been out since like the 90s. So I'm going to talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. When the show came out in 2019, I hadn't read it. So I was unfamiliar with the source material. I had friends who were interested because they played the first 2 Witcher video games. I can't remember what the first one was called. The second one was called like Assassin of Kings or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then Witcher 3, the video game Wild Hunt, had been out for a little while as well. That came out around the time of Skyrim, I believe, like the year after Skyrim came out. So like 2014-ish. But I watched season 1, and then I went back and I read all of the books by the time season 2 came out. So where I was not much. I didn't really know anything about it. Where I am now is I've read all of the series. I've played The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and I've watched seasons 1 and 2 of the show. What about you?
I had very little even familiarity with The Witcher when the show came out. I think the first Witcher video game was 2007 or something like that. And I remember seeing advertisements for it because at the time I was playing a lot of Neverwinter Nights 2. And I don't know if it was similar gameplay or not, but fantasy video games at the time. And I thought about downloading it. I thought about buying it, but I never did. And to be quite frank, I thought it was because it was a homebrew game that somebody posted that just like became well known. That speaks to my lack of familiarity with the base material. Fast forward to 2019, The Witcher comes out on Netflix, and Haley and I watched the first episode, and I didn't like it. This is a theme, I guess, with me. I didn't like the first episode of Andor.
Well, let's get a little bit more detail about this, because you guys attempted to watch the first season and made it like episode 3. And then I had a conversation with you guys when I was back in Michigan one time, and I was like, it's not a linear story. There's 3 different storylines going on at the same time in season 1. And then you guys went back and watched it?
Yes. So you corrected us. So like many folks, because I remember there being a meme going around about the multiple timelines and how that was throwing everybody off. And if once you could kind of get over that, you could get into it. I can't remember exactly what was going on. December 2019, that's like right before COVID. I think it was then we came back to it during COVID, kind of like many people were running out of things to do and stuff to watch. And so we came back to this show. Talking to you did help us just kind of recommit, and we kind of powered through whatever negative feelings we had, and then watched the rest of season 1, watched season 2. And then after watching season 2, we started listening to the audiobooks when we were in the car together. Haley and I will take road trips to Grand Rapids to see your folks. We'll go down to Washington, D.C. to see family. And when we're on the road, we listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. So full disclosure, on a couple of those occasions, we were listening to the audiobook very late at night, very early in the morning. So my memory might not be perfect. And I think there's a difference in your ability to ingrain the material, especially from a fantasy book where you have names like novel spellings and a lot of proper nouns. I might not have ingrained them as much. And then I think when the spelling of a name isn't tight in your mind, it's hard to remember that person's role in the story. So my familiarity with the material is probably significantly degraded compared to yours, having read the books. But that being said, I'm a fan of the novels, have not played any of the video games, and I guess we will understand how I feel about the show as we move through these podcasts.
And how we're going to do this, hopefully, if you're listening to part 1 of our Witcher season 1 recap, you've watched the show. Otherwise, you should go back and watch it before you pay attention to us. But what we're going to do is read the episode 4 recap, which is the halfway point of the series. And then we're going to talk about the 3 storylines and what our opinions were of the show up to this point. So Sam, would you like to read the episode 4 recap? Or I can do it because I've got it up right now as well.
Yeah, why don't you go for it? And then I can figure out how to pronounce things based on how you pronounce them.
Okay, sounds good. Episode 4 of Banquets, Bastards, and Burials. In 1240, having served Aedirn for 30 years, Yennefer, along with Queen Callis of Lyria, is ambushed by an assassin. In the ensuing chase, Yennefer flees, unable to save Callis and her newborn daughter from the assassin. In 1249, Geralt accompanies Jaskier to the betrothal feast of Princess Pavetta, Queen Calanthe's daughter. Urchion of Erlenwald, also known as Duny, interrupts to demand Pavetta's hand through the law of surprise, having saved her father's life several years before. Urchion suffers from a curse that transformed him into a hedgehog-man creature. Despite Pavetta's acceptance, Calanthe refuses and a brawl ensues. When Calanthe tries killing Urchion, Pavetta activates her power, unleashing a maelstrom until Geralt and Mousak intervene. Wanting her daughter happy, Calanthe marries Duny and Pavetta, which lifts his curse. Duny, thankful for Geralt's aid, insists he take a reward. Geralt jokingly invokes the law of surprise for something Duny has but does not yet know. The crowd then immediately learns Pavetta is pregnant. In 1263, Nilfgaard's forces resume their pursuit of Cirilla, Pavetta's daughter, with Mousak as their prisoner. Meanwhile, Cirilla and Dara encounter the Dryad Queen Aithne in Brokilon Forest, while Cahir and Fringilla attack Ciri's location, or track Ciri's location. So we have 3 storylines, which is why season 1 can be complicated for people. In the first storyline, up to this point, Yennefer has gone through her training. She has kind of disregarded orders that were given to her on which kingdom she was going to serve and kind of paves her own path. And then we end with her being unable to save a queen and the queen's daughter from an assassin. Our second storyline is Geralt. So Geralt and Jaskier, the whole storyline with them kind of gallivanting throughout the kingdoms at this point. This ends with him doing the law of surprise and then pretty much being granted Pavetta's and Duny's daughter. And then the final storyline here is with Mousak, Cirilla, and Nilfgaard. which is kind of like the modern day storyline.
Yeah, it's the like contemporary, the furthest that the timeline has advanced.
Yeah. And that's where we're at. So in general, Sam, with The Witcher in season 1, let's get past your confusion on the storylines in particular. What are your main thoughts on The Witcher?
Yeah.
Who are your favorite characters? Who are your favorite actors? Things like that.
So Geralt is great. Henry, good old Hank Cavill is phenomenal. He's a treasure. You've already mentioned how it's going to be really hard to watch season 4 if you watch it without him. I think at this point I had gotten into his portrayal. Cirilla is not I feel for Cirilla. You know, everything has been taken from her, very traumatic. Watched her grandmother basically dying. Everybody she knows is being killed. She's being hunted. So you feel for her, which is kind of invests you in her storyline, even though it's you kind of get the general sense of where things are going, and you're rooting for Geralt and Cirilla to be reunited. And then the stuff with Yennefer, I think this is where Yennefer, the whole like magical training stuff is a little tried with me at this point, because is such a trope in fantasy of the maid school and things are tough and yada yada.
You're just a random peasant who's gifted.
Yeah. All of a sudden a wizard shows up at your door and says, you know, you've got the power, come with me. And then it's hard. So what made that interesting was the transformation that she goes through and that sacrifice that because basically I don't know. Let me ask you this. Was it clear to you on first watch, and maybe this is something in the novels that you've since read, that they remove all of her reproductive organs in order to create the spell that changes her body?
Yeah, because in the books, the whole premise is she's seeking out a way to be able to reproduce.
Yeah, she's basically she's trying to get her uterus back.
Yeah, she's barren.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was an intense scene. But yeah, it kind of sets up who Yennefer is. The chase with the assassin bug is great. I love that whole sequence of the attack on the carriage and then the portal jumping and
how it's able to track them through like a necklace that the king gave her.
Yeah. And that I don't know if up to this point you've gotten a really good sense of the politics of the world. But this is something that really comes through in the novels. And I should be clear, I have not read or listened to The Last Witch and The Sword of Destiny, which are what season 1 is largely based on. I have read I've listened to The Blood of Elves, Time of Contempt, and then
Baptism of Fire.
And then we're in the middle of The Tower of Swallows, I think is the book that we're currently on. I know there's at least one more that we have to get to. So I've got a lot of space to continue learning.
Lady of the Lake is the last.
Lady of the Lake. And so, I mean, the politics kind of permeates the novels, starting with Blood of Elves. I don't know how much politics is inserted into the prequel stories. And I consider those to be the prequels from what I've read online.
No, it's true. The 2 prequel books are pretty much just a compilation of short stories.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of them, and it's not, a lot of them are the author, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his name.
Sapkowski.
There you go. He takes a fairy tale and kind of turns it on its head, right? So you get we got this in the first episode of season 2 with the Beauty and the Beast analog, right? Kind of you turn it on its head a little bit. So, you know, from what I understand, there's similar things like that. So the genie story, for instance, is Aladdin, but kind of recast in Sapkowski's way of doing things.
In his gritty fantasy world.
Yes, in his gritty fantasy world where politics is cutthroat. And so we get a lot of this in the novels. And then this episode with the assassination, it's I think they say it in the actual episode, it's the king of Lyria sends the assassin to kill his wife and his newborn daughter. Yeah, because he wants a male heir.
She hasn't produced a male heir up to this point. Yeah.
Exactly. And so you get a sense of how cutthroat things are. And this, I think the novels actually do this better than the show has done it so far of demonstrating this. But there's always this very, very tense game of back and forth politics with, I can't remember his name. Again, this is the problem of listening to the books instead of reading them. The spy master for the Northern Kingdom.
Nilfgaard?
No. What's his? He's played by the bald Scottish dude. Philippa Anhalt is his collaborator.
Hold on.
The head of intelligence for.
Oh, yeah. Hang on.
Here, trivia game, everybody. What's the name of the head of the intelligence network for
Dijkstra?
Dijkstra, and he's from Redania, right?
I want to say I was able to look that up without. I grabbed my phone to search it, but it came to me.
There you go.
It's Dijkstra.
So Dijkstra, I mean, like Dijkstra is pulling all of these strings, and you've got the kings kind of coming, the kings of the north coming together, and deciding, who's going to kill who and who's going to marry who and what's going to happen. And up to this point, you don't get a ton of the politics in the show. And frequent listeners of this podcast will know I like the politics stuff. I like it as a background. I like it as a setting the stage for the action that we see in the situations the characters find themselves in.
Yeah, and I like to tell people that the Witcher universe is kind of like a mix between Tolkien and George R.R. Martin.
Yep.
It is political, it's violent, and you still have that mix of like elves, dwarves, magical beasts, things like that. And what I love, this book series was the first time in a very long time where I read a series and then got to the last book and was sad that the series was over because I wanted more. And unfortunately, Sapkowski, after the books became really popular, like years later, he released another prequel called Season of Storms. And I hated it because it feels so much different than all the other books because he wrote those all at the same time. And then this one, it's like he was trying to go back and rediscover that feel, and it doesn't have it at all. And it was a really bummer of an experience for me reading that book. But the Witcher books are great. And luckily with season 1 of this show, it is very faithful to those prequel books. So when you're watching the show and then you go back and they don't use every story from the 2 prequel books in season 1, but they use a fair number of them. And when you go back and watch the show, and then if you've read the books, you go, oh, these are pretty much the same thing. Not verbatim, but pretty darn close to verbatim. We'll get to it in season 2, but this is the first time where like the season and a full novel of a book are being covered in the same source material. And for some reason, the showrunners decided to like deviate from the story and change things in a relatively substantial way. And I know we're not talking about season 2 yet, but it's so bothersome that it's so different and that you end up not liking it. But that's one thing that I want to say with season 1 that I enjoyed so much is that it is the books and they don't deviate in a lot of the storylines. And you have Geralt, Henry Cavill, who is a phenomenal Geralt. He has that deadpan, really dry delivery of lines. The whole thing about Witchers is that they're supposed to be like stripped of their humanity and their emotion, and he delivers those lines so perfectly. And that's also why I'm really dreading him not being there in season 4.
Yeah.
But we have seasons 1 of 2 where we can go back and watch Geralt. The multiple storylines, the first time I watched the show, did mess with me until like episode 3 or 4. And then they kind of give some hints that things are connected. Like Yennefer, when she's at the ball in, I think it's episode 3, where she comes out after her uterus being ripped out and changed in being beautiful. They reference one of the kids, one of the king's children, is the old king that Geralt is trying to change the daughter back into a princess, like remove her curse.
Yeah. So the child version of Foltest is at the ball.
Yeah.
And then we meet the older adult version of Foltest in the same episode, different
with
timeline.
Geralt. Yeah. So that's when I finally caught on that there's something that I'm missing, and then everything clicked at that point.
If you go back and watch it, they do from episode 1, they set this up where I think they have Renfri and Geralt talking about Calanthe and referring to her as, she's only 16, but she just, conquered XYZ province, and then cut to Calanthe as a middle-aged woman fully within, control of, her realm with her granddaughter, with this older husband. So that there are two different timelines. But when you're first watching, when like somebody in my shoes, haven't read the books, haven't played the video games, they mention this person named Queen Calanthe, and it's in one ear and out the other, because I don't know if at that point you even met Calanthe, so there was no person to reference to. So it's one of those things where you'd have to catch up, and once you meet Calanthe as an older person, you have to tie it back to that earlier piece of dialogue. So, but on rewatch, especially already knowing, you can catch those hints.
Oh, for sure. And when you watch it the first time and they say kingdoms like Nilfgaard, Temeria, you're just like, okay. And you can't put them together. But when the more time you spend with the material, then you can start to draw connections and figure things out.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about with especially episode 4, the halfway point, is the law of surprise. Mm-hmm. And this is the major thing. I think there's frequent mentions of Destiny. Sword of Destiny is one of the either short stories or the name of the entire one of the prequel books. Destiny brought together Geralt and Ciri through the law of surprise. It's invoked in order for Cirilla's parents to get together, and then
it's invoked in a way. If you watch the show, Geralt does it in like a throwaway thing.
Yes,
because in the history of the Witchers, that's what they used to like recruit boys to become Witchers. And I think they say something like only like 10% of all young boys that go through the process actually can survive it and become a Witcher. So it was used in the past in like this ancient formality. And when they're really like pushing Geralt to be like, we need to pay you, like, we're not going to owe somebody something for something that they did. And he's kind of like, okay, yeah, I'm going to say the phrase for the law of surprise. And then that's the whole Destiny thing coming in. Geralt doesn't even believe in it. He's like, sure, it could be like a bushel of apples is my payment because you don't know that you have them. And then she throws up immediately, revealing that she's pregnant. And then it's like, oh, Destiny's kicking in. And yeah.
Well, so two thoughts. One, a little bit less serious. What if she just got food poisoning? Right? It's like everybody just assumes she's pregnant. Like morning sickness usually happens in the morning. Maybe she just had some bad oysters from the Skellig Islands or whatever. But on a more serious note, there's also a law of surprise type thing in the movie, I want to call it The Green Giant, but it's not The Green Giant, The Green Knight, which we watched together.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
We'll save that for an After Dark.
Yeah. Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things After
At
Dark. must show ID. But there's a law of surprise in that as well. And I think we watched that. I think we watched The Green Knight around the same time. Because I think it was pre-COVID because you were visiting us in Detroit when we watched that. And I don't remember.
No, I think that was like 2021.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my memory's shot, but then
because I remember it was COVID and we stayed in your house and we didn't like go out and do anything.
Okay. It was also wintertime.
And it was winter.
But so I thought it was kind of interesting there that that's a it's not a major plot point, but it's a somewhat significant plot point in the Green Knight. This, I don't know if they call it the law of surprise, but basically, something similar of, give me, I'm going to go out hunting. This was the Lord has the hosts the night Gawain, and there's, as part of this rule of hospitality, the Lord goes out hunting and says, I will give you whatever I catch on my hunting trip and you will repay me with whatever you receive during the course of the day. And it results in a kiss, which was notable.
A very awkward.
It kind of came out of nowhere. And I was like, one of the several instances in that movie, and I was like, what is going on? But there were also some other things that heightened my perception or limited my perception, as it were. Anyway,
I think that's one of the movies where I left loving it, especially the first time, because I watched it before we watched it with you. And then I was expecting you to enjoy it, and then it just confused the shit out of you, if anything.
To be fair, I did enjoy it. I thought it was really cool, especially visually. It was great. We're not talking about the Green Knight. Just quick aside, I would like to rewatch it in, let's say, reminded state, and then I think I might be able to really appreciate it more. But yeah, when we were watching it that time, I was freaking out.
Yeah. Well, what else about The Witcher?
One thing I like is just kind of the episodic adventures. The thing that I did enjoy about season one, even with the time jumping, was that you had Geralt in all of these situations where there was a problem. Kind of it was more, I like the episodic approach of, I've got to either kill or save Renfri, right? And that's one episode arc. The confrontation with Filavandrel is one episode arc, and he's got to escape from these various situations using his brain and his martial prowess, or his uncanny ability to kind of decipher situations. So that I appreciated. And
the episode with the Striga was its own thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And he figures out that, the Striga, the trick is you can't let it go back to its resting place when the sun rises. So you got to, do whatever I can to keep it out in the open until that. And he comes up with a way of doing it, and he uses his Witcher abilities to do it. And then, but it was done really well, where that tied into the Yennefer storyline with the presence of Foltest, and then Foltest shows up again at the end of the series, spoiler alert, in the end of the season with Battle of Sodden. So that's what I like. I like that type of approach to adventure. To me, that's we're always going to go back to this. It's the D&D approach, right? You're traveling through the countryside, and the peasants ask you to help them with their monster problem, and you do it. And that's like the quintessential Witcher experience. But
I'll say, so it's like this show is like a mix of three things: Tolkien, George R. Martin, and D&D. Because there's so much more magic in the Witcher universe than there is in either Tolkien or Martin. And the culmination of those three things, I think, makes for a very entertaining fantasy show.
Yep.
And I agree with you. Season one is so good because they take this episodic approach of that series of short stories that the first two books are based off of. And we'll kind of get to it with season two, that where they start to struggle is that linear storyline, where the actual series of the books, beginning with Blood of Elves, starts. Now, the books do it really well, where 1 through 5, I was sold the entire time, but the show seemed to struggle with season 2. And we'll talk about that in 2 episodes from now. We're talking about the first half. But yeah, I mean, up to this point, in the first 4 episodes of season 1, they've made Nilfgaard out to be a great villain, a great bad guy. They're pretty much only in the arc with Cirilla at this point through 4 episodes. They're referenced a couple times later on in the Yennefer arc, and in particular, because she has one of the witches that she hangs out with an Eastred as well, who is known as her lover in episode 3, when she still had the hunchback. He ends up going to work for Nilfgaard. So all of these different stories and villains begin to intertwine, but
I guess maybe the final thread that we should pick up is the elf thread. So in this season so far, we've learned of the quarter elven heritage of Yennefer, and how that is one, it caused her deformity, but also it is a reason for her to be an outcast, because elves are not welcome among human society. In fact, there's a lot of violence there. And then we also have the confrontation encounter with Filavandrel, the king of the elves, and we learn more about the human kind of conquest, colonization, and eviction of the elves, and they're being pushed to kind of the fringes of the civilized world. And
there's pretty much like an elven genocide.
Yeah. Elven genocide. And then we kind of do we get Calanthe and her bloodthirstiness for the elves in this season? Because we get a little bit of it with Dara, but I don't think that hasn't happened yet through episode 4. I think that comes later on. Oh no, I think that happens. We get that in the second episode, where Ciri is brought to that refugee camp, and then it's attacked. And in the course of that, you are reminded about the elven hatred. Yeah, so that's something that will come up again. Again, the first book in the series is The Blood of Elves. This can become very important in the discussion of why Ciri is the child of destiny, and the implications that it has kind of for the overall conflict politics in the world of The Witcher.
And we discover in episode 3 that Ciri also has that magical ability that her mom Pavetta portrayed as well. She's gifted in some sort.
Yes.
So yeah, they leave us off in a pretty good spot in episode 4. And the worst part, the very end, the whole, can we just say, maybe it's like an interpretation or translation issue between Polish and English. But can we talk about the name Mousesack?
Okay. Yeah. Well, so there's that, and there's also Jaskier and versus his character in the books.
Dandelion.
Yeah, or so in the audiobooks, they pronounce it Dandelion, which I actually really like as a name for anybody, but especially for this bard. I think Jaskier is actually a retranslation of that. I don't know, but what is Mousesack?
Well, this is a spoiler, because in the second season, he's called Dandelion. So I think really? Jaskier is kind of like the name he uses. I'm pretty sure.
So Jaskier in Polish means dandelion.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So they could have just called him Dandelion or Dandelion, but I get why they call him Jaskier.
But yeah, and then the whole Mousesack thing, though, like the first time I heard it, I just had to go, wait, what? Did they just say Mousesack is his name? So I don't know if it means something else, but I was a little thrown off by that.
I mean, Mousesack is his name in the English translations of the book, correct?
Yeah.
Let's see. He's also supposed to be a druid, which that doesn't really come through in the show as much. Or yes, it does. They talk about it.
It does a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's not one of like the sorcerers. He's his own thing.
Which the first time I watched it, I didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. And I was like, so he's also a sorcerer? I like how, and it was.
No, because the whole thing is Calanthe, she won't allow sorcerers into her court. So that's why the sorcerers are like, oh, Nilfgaard's attacking? Okay, well, maybe we just let them do it. But she does have a druid in her court.
Yeah, so I think in the video games, he is dressed significantly differently from everyone else. He looks like a dude from the forest, And I think had they done that in the show, it would have been clear that his magic is different.
It would have come across differently.
Yeah. I'm not getting anything. I knew about the Dandelion Yaskir translation thing, but Mousak, I don't know what's going on there. Maybe it means something in Polish that we just don't, like the Mousak translated into Polish means something that we're not familiar with.
So if you listen to the show and you know Polish, let us know if Mousak means anything. Otherwise, I'm going to keep thinking of a mouse's testicles. So
yeah,
that's where we'll leave that.
Let's leave that there.
Do you have anything else to talk about part 1 of season 1? Any other testicles you want to talk about?
Those are all of the testicles that come to mind.
We do see Cavill booty in this season. I don't know if it's through the first 4 episodes, but
there's a couple of bath scenes, right?
Yeah.
I know there's one that's going to come up in our next episode. But this was I think like took me a while to get into it, but Witcher season 1, good television, very enjoyable. Looking forward to the rest of this conversation. But I think that's all I got for tonight.
Right on. Next week, we will be covering the second half of The Witcher season 1, which is episodes 5 through 8. And then we get into season 2, which I am ready to kind of
parse, dissect,
really
get into,
complain.
Oh, okay. Right.
I did not like season 2. So
we'll talk all about it.
We'll talk about it
coming up. Okay, everybody. Until we see you again, please get in touch via Facebook, Els Rings and Nerdy Things. You can also send us an email, elsringsnerdythings@gmail.com. Big thank you to all of our listeners, our subscribers, and our paid supporters. We appreciate everyone, and we will talk to you next week. Bye now.
Auf Wiedersehen.